Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
What's up guys, I'm Andy from 1A Auto. Today I'm going to show you how to install an upper control arm on this 2009 Chevy Suburban. If you need this part or other parts for your vehicle, click the link in the description and head over to 1aauto.com. You're going to want to keep in mind whenever you're doing any kind of suspension repair, whether you're replacing components or removing and reinstalling components, you're going to change your steering angles. You're going to want to go to a local shop and have your alignment performed. First, I'm going to take this center cap off. Just use a straight blade screwdriver. Get behind this little tab right here. There's another one right here. Slide it off. Now we're going to loosen up the lug nuts. I'm going to take a 7/8 socket and a breaker bar. You can also use a 22mm socket. Loosen these up. Now I'm going to raise and support the vehicle. I'm using a 2-post lift. If you're doing this at your house, you can use a jack and jack stands. I'll take the lug nuts off. Just make sure they're all loose first. Yep, good. I'll take the last lug nut off. Grab the tire. Pull it off. To take the upper control arm out, you don't need to take the strut out, but it makes it a lot easier to get these 2 bolts out because the bolts have to go inward, and instead of fighting with them, the strut comes out fairly easily. We're going to disconnect the upper strut mount nuts on this vehicle. There is a wiring harness with a retainer right here. Just pull up on that, and there's the 3 nuts up top. If your vehicle happens to have this little connector here, you can push on this and pop it off. This vehicle has deleted this option, so it's not connected. I'll take a 15mm socket, a swivel, extension, and a ratchet. Loosen up these nuts. Right, these lower shock or lower strut bolts are pretty rusty, so I'm just going to use a little rust penetrant. I'm going to take a 18mm wrench, put it on top on the nut, and then a 15mm socket and ratchet on the bottom bolt, and I'm going to loosen them up. Take those out, and then I'll take the other one out. It's easier to crack the nut free instead of trying to loosen up on the bolt. Once that's loose, then you can loosen the bolt. Pull that bolt out. Right. I'm going to take a pry bar. I'm just going to pry down on the lower control arm. Move the strut inward so that it's off of this little seat right there. Do that. I can lower this down, and I can slide the top out. Pull it straight out from the top. Now I'm going to remove the front axle. Before I take these bolts out, I am going to mark the housing where it's located, so that when I put it back together, it's in the exact same place. I don't know that it necessarily is going to cause any issues. I just like to put it back together the way it came apart. I'm going to use a 15mm socket and a ratchet. I'm going to loosen this up. When I'm loosening this, it's spinning. So what I'm going to do is take a pry bar from the outside. Just gonna hold it between the lugs. Keep it from spinning. Loosen it up. I'll loosen up the other ones as well. I'm gonna take all these bolts out. There's 6 of them. Once those bolts are out, take the axle, just slide it forward, slip it down. I'm gonna loosen up this axle nut. I'm gonna take a pry bar, just put it between the lugs right there, and take the axle nut socket, a 36 millimeter, and a breaker bar. I'm gonna loosen this up. Be careful when doing this. The axle nut is very tight. All right. Break that loose. I'll take my pry bar and a ratchet socket, and I'll just loosen it up. And take this nut off. There's a little washer under here, or big washer. Take that off as well. Next, we're gonna take a hammer. If this is on really tight when you tap it, then you can put the nut back on so that you don't ruin the threads. This axle is not that tight, so I'm gonna hold the axle with my other hand, gently tap it so that I can remove the axle. Just like that. And just pull it out of the way. I'm gonna remove this ABS harness out of my way. I'm just gonna take a trim tool, just go underneath the retainer. It's underneath there, just pry up. Pull that out. And we'll disconnect the electrical connector. There's a little button right here you can push, or if yours is stuck in there a little bit, you can release it underneath here with a straight head screwdriver. So there, push down here. There we go, disconnect that connector. And I'm gonna release it right here. Take the straight blade screwdriver. Oops. Disconnect that, just like that. Set it aside. I'm going to disconnect this bracket. This holds the brake hose, and also this is for the suspension. It's a sensor that senses the suspension height. We'll just use a 10 millimeter socket, an extension, and a ratchet. Get that out, and this bracket will just come up here, slide out of the way. You can pop this little ball and socket off if you want, but be careful. Generally, these little plastic things break, so if you just set it out of the way, it should be fine. Next, I'm going to loosen this upper ball joint nut up. I'm going to use an 18 millimeter wrench. Loosen it up. I'm not going to take it off completely. This would help to have a ratchet wrench at this point. All right, now this is finger tight. Actually, I pulled it off, but I'm going to put it back on. Just a couple threads. Doesn't really matter. It's fine. Just Just gonna turn the wheel a little bit. Now, if you were reusing this upper control arm and ball joint, you might not want to use a pickle fork to release this ball joint. You might want to, there is other types of tools you can use to release a ball joint. You can give it a little tap. You gotta be careful when you do this. Just tap on the knuckle and it will release just like that. The reason I leave the nut there is so all this stuff doesn't come flying, so it's easier for me to later go in with a pry bar, just push down on this, then I can take the nut off, and then gently release this. Okay, at this point, just make sure your brake hose doesn't have too much tension on it. It is a good idea if you wanted to put a support underneath this lower control arm, but it's not necessary. So now we're gonna move on to these two bolts. I am gonna spray these down with some rust penetrant. They are pretty rusty. Right there and right here. Before we take this upper arm out, we want to pay attention to the alignment cams that are on the top. Now these actually have these plastic little inserts in. They're basically like knockouts. The older vehicles had something called knockouts, which you actually had to take and hammer them out. These ones just have these plastic little pieces. So in the factory, when they put this vehicle together, they use those and that aligns this where it needs to be. So if you have those, then you're good. If not, you're gonna wanna take a marker, just make a mark where this little pin is. You can do it on the inside or the outside, and then same on this one as well. And just get it as close as possible when you go to put it back together. And then your alignment might be closer, which is good. It'll make it easier to drive down the road to go have your alignment performed. So before I take this out, one more thing I want to keep in mind. When I put the new upper arm in and I tighten down the bolts, I'm going to want this arm to be in this same location because that'll prevent your bushings from wearing out too early. What I do is I take a socket right here. I happen to measure a 13mm socket and it fits in there nicely. So when I put the new arm in, I'm gonna put this in this position and put the socket here. So just check that before, and then I will go and tighten those down. Otherwise, what you would have to do is have these bolts in there loosely and then put the vehicle on the ground so that it's at ride level, and then torque those two nuts down, which when the vehicle's down on the ground at ride level, it's kind of hard to get a torque wrench in there. So if you do it this way, makes it a lot easier. Next, I want to loosen up this nut and the bolt. I'm going to use a 13/16 wrench on the inside. You can also use a 21, and then a 21mm socket and a breaker bar on the nut. Loosen it up. It's on there pretty tight. Oh, I'm gonna loosen up this one. Now that it's loose, I can use a ratchet. I'll just take a hammer, just give the bolt a tap. Tap it inwards. It's sticking a little bit, so I'm going to spray some more rust penetrant. Spray it on the outside. I'm just going to take the hammer and just work it back and forth. Just grab a punch and then hammer it through. Oh, this cam came off this side, So just keep in mind that that is the one that's further closer to the driver. Just tap it through. Slide that bolt right out. This bolt actually broke in here, so I'm just gonna try to take a punch and try to hammer it out a little bit. Actually, take a pry bar or a screwdriver, take this front cam off, use a little more rust penetrant. Then I'll take my hammer, just hammer it in. Oh, it's frozen pretty good. Take my wrench and just try to work it back and forth. So our bolt on the front of this upper control arm actually sheared off right here. So what I have to do is hammer it in. We tried pulling it out and it's not coming out, so we're gonna have to use an air hammer to get it out. Spray a little rust penetrant there, let it soak for a little bit. Just try taking a wrench and just see if I can get it to move a little bit more. If I can spin it, it'll loosen up. Oh, it's in there good. Just gonna tap it back in. Take a wrench and hopefully be able to spin it. There it goes. It's loose enough. Take a pry bar and just pry it out. And there's the bolt. You can grab this upper control arm, wiggle it back and forth. If you need a pry bar, get underneath and pry it out. Make sure you watch out for this sensor. Keep that out of the way. There you go, pull it out. Here's the old upper control arm. Here's our new upper control arm from 1aauto.com. As you can see, the shape is the same. The ball joint itself looks a little bigger, which is gonna make it last a lot longer. Flip it over, it comes with new bushings. Comes with a new nut. Take this nut off. There's a little cover on here. That's just for shipping, so you wanna take that off. Comes with a cotter pin and a grease fitting. It's greasable, which makes it last longer. Get yours at 1aauto.com and you'll be ready to rock and roll. So we need to swap this cam off this bolt. from the old one to the new one, but where we were hammering on the end, it's mushroomed out a little bit, so it's not gonna come off of there. So what I'm gonna do is take a die grinder, and I'm just gonna sand this down a little bit. Slide that off, and we can transfer that to our new bolt. Then we can reinstall this. I'm just gonna take a wire brush just because I got a lot of rust penetrant in here, and I don't want that to cause my upper control arm to move. So I'll just use a wire brush, clean this up a little bit. Take some brake parts cleaner, clean that off. Do this side as well. All right, so now we're going to take the upper control arm and try to get it in position. Take the new bolts. I'll get that in position. See, if you had the strut in here at this time, it'd be a little bit tricky to get these in and out. And I'll take this cam on the back side and try to line that plastic up with that little tab, just like that. Put the new nut on this side. I'll take the front cam and just slide that in position. Line that up with the plastic. Put the nut on. All right, now we're going to position the upper control arm where we took it off. We're going to use the socket that we used before to measure the distance. So that's at the height that we want to torque it down at. What you could also do is put it all together, put the wheel on, and then torque it with the wheel on. It's a little bit trickier to do it that way, so just do it with the socket to hold it there. I'm going to use a 21mm wrench and a 21mm socket and a ratchet. I'm just going to snug these up first. You can also use a 13/16. Then I'll take a torque wrench with my 21, and I'm going to torque these to 140 foot-pounds. Do the same with the front one. Now we can remove our socket. At this point, we can install the knuckle. Just get it lined up. Then use a pry bar. Pry down on the upper control arm. Then I'll take the castle nut that it comes with. Get that started. While I'm prying down on that, get the nut up there, and I'll take an 18mm socket and a ratchet, get that snug. Now I'm going to torque this nut to 37 foot-pounds. The new ball joint comes with a new cotter pin, and you have to line it up with the hole in the stud. And after you torque the nut, if it doesn't line up, you can tighten it up a little bit more to get it to line up. A little bit more. Take the cotter pin, put it through the hole, And I'll take some straight cutters. Just gonna bend the cotter pin down. Just like that. I'm gonna trim off the excess and then trim it off up top as well. And you're all set. I'll take the grease fitting that it comes with. Get that started. Just take a 7mm wrench or a 7mm socket. Just snug it up, not too tight. You don't want it to break. All right, next I'm gonna get this bracket lined up. Take the 10mm bolt, get that started. Take a 10mm socket and a ratchet, just snug this up. Now we can reposition the ABS wiring harness. Get that position there, then lock it down in place. Connect the connector. Lock it in place and then reposition it. At this point we can grease the fittings. Just take a grease gun, position that on the grease fitting, and give it a couple pumps. I normally look to see the boot expand a little bit. You don't want to put too much grease in. And that's pretty good right there. Now we're going to install the strut. Just slide this in. And then slide it up. You're going to line the studs up top. And I grabbed a nut. And I'm just gonna get one of the nuts started. I'm gonna use a pry bar, pry in on the spring side. This actually is a little easier if you have the sway bar link out. Get that in position. And I'll pry it back into place. Just like that. Right, now I'm gonna take these strut bolts, get these lined up. If they don't line up with the holes, you can take a screwdriver. Try to get this to line up first. And get the bolt through. Put the nut on top. The same with this side. Take a 18mm wrench and a 15mm socket and ratchet, tighten these bolts up. Now I'm going to torque these to 37 foot-pounds. We'll take the other nuts and get those started up top. I'll take a 15mm socket and a ratchet, just snug these up, and I'm going to torque them. Now I'm going to get a torque wrench and torque these to 37 foot-pounds. We're going to push this wire retainer onto one of those studs, and then if you have this connector, you're going to connect that to the top of the strut. Now we're going to send the axle back into position. Slide it up from underneath. Slide it into the wheel bearing. Might have to twist it a little bit. And we're gonna take this flange, just bend it out a little bit. Slide that in position. I'm gonna try to line this up with how I took it out. That's the marks that I made. Take these bolts, get these started. Now I'm gonna start to tighten these up. I'm gonna use a 15mm socket and a ratchet. What I'm gonna do is just snug this side up, then I'm gonna spin the axle and tighten the opposite side. Just snug that one up. And I'll go around the rest of the axle. Tighten these up. I'm gonna use a pry bar to hold the axle from spinning. Just put it on the lugs out front. Then I'm going to tighten these down to 58 foot-pounds. I'm going to do this the same way. So I just torqued that one down. I'm going to spin it to the complete opposite side. Torque this one down so it gets tightened down evenly. Now I'll just go around and tighten them all down. That's good. Now I'll take the washer, put that on the axle, and then the nut. Put the axle nut on. Now I'll take a 36mm socket and ratchet, snug this down. Now I can lower this vehicle down and put the pry bar on the ground. I'm just going to do it by hand. And hold it. Just be careful. I'm going to torque this to 177 foot-pounds. Now I'll take the tire, put the tire back on. Put the lug nuts back on. All right, now I'm going to use a torque wrench, 7/8 socket. You could also use a 22mm socket. And I'm going to torque these lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds. We're going to do this in a cross pattern. That will tighten the wheel down evenly. Just go around again, double check. We're going to install the center cap. On the back side of the center cap, it shows where the valve stem is. So you're going to line that up with where the valve stem goes and push it back on.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1AAuto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.